Imagine finding out your wife cheated on you with 2 men. How do you move on? Alex, shattered by pain, gives Maddie one last chance, but with one condition: absolute honesty. As the truth unravels, he realizes he can't take it anymore. The final blow? His confession that he's in love with her friend. How do you choose between forgiveness and revenge? You won't want to miss the end of this story. Alex came home early in the evening, took off his jacket, and tossed it onto the chair by the door. He felt exhausted after a long day at work, but the first thing he did was head to the fridge to grab a beer. The house was quiet, and that surprised him. Usually, his wife, Maddie, would be sitting on the couch or already preparing dinner when he arrived. But tonight, she wasn't there. He pulled out the beer and was about to step outside to gather his thoughts in the fresh air when his old friend Laura called. "Hey, Alex, how are you?" Her voice sounded as carefree as always, but there was something in her tone that made him feel uneasy. "Everything's fine, Laura. What's up?" "I was just thinking about you and Maddie. Have you talked to her?" Laura asked, avoiding a direct answer. "Not really. What's going on?" Alex felt a growing sense that something was wrong but couldn't pinpoint what it was. "Maddie's been acting different lately." I don't think she's telling you everything," Laura said hesitantly. Alex sighed. Laura was always straightforward, but her words immediately filled him with worry. Within minutes, they were talking about everything, from work to Laura's suspicions about Maddie's behavior. "Maddie's never been this secretive. I don't know what's gotten into her," Laura said, as if confirming Alex's unspoken thoughts. A chill ran down Alex's spine. Something was definitely off, and he decided he needed to talk to Maddie. But when he went back inside the house, she wasn't there. Only a note was left on the table. "Sorry, but I can't be home right now. Maddie." Alex sat on the couch, not knowing what to do next. He knew their marriage was going through a rough patch, but he didn't want to believe it could be something serious. The next day, he decided to leave work early to see what Maddie was up to since she hadn't replied to his messages. When he got to the house, he immediately heard a familiar sound, a phone ringing on the table. It was a number he didn't recognize. He picked up the call and overheard a conversation. "You can't just leave everything like this. I know how you feel, Maddie." Alex couldn't hold back his emotions and instantly ended the call. "What was that?" he asked himself, staring at the blank phone screen. Questions swirled in his mind that he didn't want to answer. Maddie didn't come home all day, and the next evening, Alex decided to follow her. It was unlike him, but his intuition told him it was the only way to find out the truth. When he arrived at her workplace, he saw her with her ex-boyfriend, Jason. His heart sank. Maddie was laughing and looked as if nothing was wrong in their relationship. But that was only one side of the story. Alex stayed hidden around the corner and waited. A few minutes later, they said their goodbyes, and Maddie left. But instead of heading home, she drove to another part of town. Alex couldn't believe his eyes when he saw Maddie enter a hotel with a man he didn't recognize. It was shocking. Minutes later, she left the hotel, this time with his friend, James. Alex stood silently, realizing that his world was beginning to fall apart. He didn't have concrete proof, but his heart couldn't deny what he was seeing. "What is she doing?" he whispered, unsure if he was asking someone or just looking for answers within himself. An hour later, when Maddie returned home, Alex couldn't stay quiet any longer. "Maddie," he called out as she walked through the door. She looked at him, surprised, as if nothing had happened. "Where were you?" His voice was filled with anger, but also doubt. I was working. Don't you trust me?" Maddie replied, looking as though everything was fine, but Alex could see something he hadn't noticed before. "I saw you with Jason, and with him, with James." His words weighed heavily on his chest as he said them. Maddie was silent, but her gaze quickly dropped, and Alex noticed her hands start to tremble. He knew this was only the beginning. "I can't take this anymore," he said, pulling himself out of the torment. "But what happens next?" Maddie didn't respond immediately. Her eyes were filled with fear. For a moment, her shoulders slumped, and then she looked up, trying to appear convincing. "You don't understand," she started, but her voice lacked its usual confidence. "I don't understand?" Alex couldn't hold back his emotions. How can I not understand when I see you with other men, Maddie? First Jason, then James. What does all of this mean? Maddie opened her mouth, but once again couldn't find the words. In her eyes, Alex saw something he couldn't comprehend. Fear, shame, or maybe both at once. I don't know how to explain it. It's not what you think, she finally said, trying to justify herself. But her voice carried so much hesitation that Alex knew she wasn't telling the truth. You're saying it's not what I think? Then how do you explain why you're constantly hiding things from me? He asked, stepping back and nervously glancing around the room. Maddie stood silent. It was clear from her expression that she understood words wouldn't help her now. Yet, she wasn't ready to give up. I didn't want to hurt you. I really didn't. But it happened. She took a step toward him, as if trying to connect with him, but he backed away. What happened, Maddie? You're still lying to me. And I can't live like this. I deserve the truth, he said firmly, though he felt shattered inside, like pieces of his world were falling apart before his eyes. I can't explain everything. It's complicated. But I want to be honest with you, Maddie said, looking into his eyes. Her voice was barely audible, as though she didn't know where to start. Alex sat on the couch, breathing heavily. All he knew for sure was that this situation had hit him so hard that his world would never be the same. He sat and listened, trying to understand how it had come to this. I love you, but there are other things I can't explain. It all started when I met someone, and everything changed. I didn't know how to stop it, she said, sitting beside him, trying to explain but looking like someone who had completely lost control. Alex said nothing. He was at a loss for words. Only one thought circled in his mind. I don't know if I can ever forgive this. In the end, he stood up from the couch, feeling like he couldn't take it anymore. Maddie looked at him, but he was already preparing to leave. There was no point in staying if every moment only deepened the lies. Where are you going? Her voice sounded almost desperate, and she tried to stand, but Alex quickly walked to the door. I'm leaving, Maddie. I need to be alone. I need to figure this out for myself. You've already confused me enough with your lies. Maddie stayed where she was, her shoulders slumping as though she truly understood that all of this had happened because of her. But she couldn't bring herself to say anything more. Alex walked out the door, hearing it close behind him. He didn't know what to do next. This was a betrayal he never expected. It was hard to accept, but he tried to collect his thoughts and move forward. A few days later, when he came back home, everything seemed as it had always been. Maddie was trying to be attentive and had even made his favorite dinner. But her gaze was cold, and the distance between them was so great that every word felt heavy. Maddie, I can't live like this anymore, Alex said, sitting at the table. We can't just keep going as if nothing happened. Maddie began to speak, but Alex didn't let her continue. You cheated on me. You were with other men, and I can't accept that. His voice was calm, but there was such determination in it that Maddie grew scared. She remained silent, but tears filled her eyes. It was hard for her to come to terms with everything that had happened, but even she knew there was no way to turn back time. What do you want me to do? She finally asked, bowing her head in defeat. Alex remained silent for a long time. He didn't know what would happen next. It was so complicated that he felt every part of him protesting against this situation. But he knew he couldn't stay in the lies any longer. I need to start over, and I don't know if that will be with you or without you, but I can't stay in this life you've built for me. His words were cold and resolute. Maddie stayed at the table, understanding that she was losing him, and even though she loved him, the betrayal was too deep to forgive. Alex quietly stood up and headed for the door, leaving Maddie alone with her thoughts. But this wasn't the end of their shared life. It was just a pause, one that cast doubt on whether they could ever return to each other. Alex left Maddie behind, his heart weighed down by thoughts of what had been done. All this time, he had tried to hold on, tried to treat everything as a minor crisis in their relationship. But what he had seen, what he had heard, turned his world upside down. Maddie was no longer the woman he had loved, and even the thought of turning back felt utterly impossible. The steps down the stairs brought him no sense of peace. Back in his car, his heart was pounding faster. He didn't know where to go. Instead of driving to a friend's house or to someone close, he headed toward a quiet park to weather the storm of his thoughts. In the darkness of the evening, he pulled over to the side of the road, leaving his car parked near an abandoned bench where he and Maddie used to stroll together. How many times had they come here, laughed, discussed their future, and planned to grow old together? He felt broken. What am I going to do now? He muttered softly, as if asking himself. He picked up his phone and saw several missed calls from Laura. He stared at the screen for a long time before deciding to call her back. Where are you? Laura's voice was the first thing he heard as soon as she answered. She sounded worried. I'm at the park. I can't talk right now. He tried to keep his emotions in check, but they were still bubbling to the surface. Laura went silent for a few seconds before asking, What happened, Alex? What did you find out? He took a deep breath and started telling her everything, holding nothing back. Maddie with Jason, and then James. I saw them at the hotel, Laura. I can't understand why she did this. Laura was silent. The pause was deafening, but in her voice, Alex sensed more than just sympathy. There was concern. I've suspected for a while that something was off with her. You need to make a decision, Alex. You can't live in this lie. He closed his eyes and felt his heart tighten. Laura was right. He couldn't stay in this relationship without knowing if it could ever have a second chance. A decision needed to be made, and he couldn't delay it any longer. Do you still want to be with her? Laura's question was so direct that it caught him off guard. He didn't know how to respond. The thought of betrayal and the painful, inexplicable feeling of fear that everything had already been irreparably destroyed terrified him. I don't know, Laura. I don't know if I can forgive her. But I loved her so much. His voice trembled. Laura was silent again. But then she said, Sometimes people change, Alex, and we can't always understand why. But you can't stay in this relationship if you don't see a future in it. Alex didn't respond. He needed more time to figure out what he really wanted. He looked at his phone and noticed a new text from Maddie. He opened the message, and it read, I need to talk to you. Please don't leave. We can work this out. I'll explain everything. Alex started breathing heavily. He couldn't decide if he wanted to hear what she had to say. All he needed was time. Time to sort things out within himself. I'll go home, but maybe this time, things will be different, he thought, not immediately understanding what that meant. Alex sat in his car, unsure of what to do. His mind was a tangled mess, and his heart was pounding heavily. He replayed everything that had happened recently in his head. Maddie's meetings with Jason and James, her cold behavior, her lies. He couldn't believe this was his reality. He loved her, and it seemed like nothing could change that, not even her betrayal. He looked at Maddie's text again. I'll explain everything. The words gnawed at his mind as though her apology was the only thing he had left. But he couldn't make sense of it. How had this happened? How had he ended up on the brink of a breakup, destroying everything that had once been so important to him? Suddenly, his phone rang again. It was Laura. Where are you? Her voice sounded worried, almost demanding. I'm here, he replied, trying to calm himself, though a storm was raging inside him. She texted me. She wants to talk. Don't go to her, Laura said firmly. You can't just brush this off as if nothing happened. You deserve better than this betrayal. Alex remained silent. She was right, but his heart was pulling him in another direction. He felt he needed to hear Maddie out, to get answers directly from her, to understand if there was any chance for their future. But what if it was just another lie? What if he was being deceived again? Maybe she's telling the truth, Laura. His voice was quiet, filled with doubt. Maybe I can forgive her. No, Alex, you can't just forgive a betrayal like that, Laura replied firmly. You deserve to be with someone who won't deceive you. Alex tossed the phone onto the seat and let out a heavy sigh. He didn't want his life to become black and white. He didn't want to lose Maddie, even if she had broken his trust. But something inside him told him he couldn't let things stay as they were. She had changed him, changed their love, and he didn't know how to fix it. He glanced at his phone again and opened Maddie's message. Where are you? She had written just a few minutes ago. Slowly, he typed his response, I'm home. We can talk. He didn't know what would happen next, but he knew one thing. This break would destroy him if he couldn't find the answers he was looking for. A few minutes later, he saw the door open. Maddie stood on the threshold, looking as though she was ready to say something but didn't know where to start. Her eyes were red, and it was clear she had been crying. "I know what you want to hear," she began, but her voice was uncertain, sad. "And I want to tell you the truth, everything as it is. But you need to understand that I didn't mean for this to happen. I didn't want to hurt you." Alex looked at her, filled with doubt. He had been waiting for this moment, and now he wasn't sure if he even wanted to hear it all. "You didn't want to hurt me, but you already did," he said bitterly. Maddie closed her eyes and took a deep breath. "I know. I understand this is hard for you, but I can't promise you that things will go back to how they were. We've both changed." "You've changed," he replied, stepping back a few steps. "You were different, Maddie, and I don't know if I can go back to how it used to be. I don't know if we can." Her voice was barely audible. "But I want to try. I really want us to find a way back. Maybe it'll take time, but I'm willing to work on fixing everything." Alex stood silently, listening to her. He didn't know if he was ready to forgive. It hurt. Her words, the fact that their life together had become this. He thought about everything, their shared plans, the time they'd spent together, and now it was all crumbling, falling apart, and he didn't know if there was still a chance to fix it. "Do you want me to forgive you?" he asked, unsure if he wanted to hear the answer. "I want you to understand that I made a mistake." She stepped closer to him, her voice trembling. "But I'm ready to fight for us, for our love." Alex closed his eyes for a moment. He wanted to believe her, but something inside him told him this might only be a temporary solution, that the pain would stay with him forever. He was torn between wanting to save the relationship and fearing the future. "I don't know if I can forgive this," he said, looking up at her. "But I also don't know what's next. You need to give me time." Maddie nodded, and a tear appeared in her eye. "I understand, and I'm willing to wait." Alex breathed heavily, standing in front of her. Something inside him screamed for him to leave, to put an end to all of this. But another feeling, his love for her, kept him in place. He wasn't ready to just let it all go, though he knew the road ahead would be difficult. Alex stood motionless, his gaze fixed on Maddie, but he wasn't really seeing her. He was lost in his thoughts, trying to find the right words to respond. Something about her words didn't sit right. She seemed genuinely sincere, but how could he forgive such a betrayal? "I don't know how to process all of this," he finally burst out. "You promised me we'd be together, that nothing would change. And now I see that you're still lying to my face." Maddie lowered her head, and his words seemed to drag her down even further. She was silent for a few seconds, as if trying to collect her thoughts, then raised her gaze, filled with bitterness and disappointment. "I don't know how it happened, Alex." Her voice was barely audible, but every word felt heavy. "I didn't mean for this to happen. I didn't want to betray you." "You didn't want to?" Alex's voice turned sharp. "But you did. And now you want me to just forget about it all?" Maddie didn't respond. She only looked at him, her eyes glistening with tears. Alex felt his heart breaking from the pain, but he couldn't allow himself to leave things unresolved. He needed the truth. He needed answers. Suddenly, her phone rang. She looked at the screen and, without saying a word, quickly pressed the answer button. Alex noticed how her expression changed. She pulled the phone away, and his gaze turned tense again. "It's James," she said, sensing his eyes on her. "You don't understand. It's not what you think." Alex felt everything inside him freeze. James, her friend, the one who had spent time with them, helped her through tough moments. And now, hearing that name, his heart shuddered with betrayal. "What is that supposed to mean?" he asked, almost whispering. Maddie lowered her gaze again, her lips trembling. She paused. "I can't keep hiding this from you anymore." Alex was on edge. He felt like there was something massive she was still keeping from him. She couldn't say everything so easily when the situation was this complicated. "Maddie, tell me what happened. Are you still talking to James, or what?" His voice was firm. She nodded. Alex stood frozen, his heart racing, his thoughts swirling in his head. He couldn't make sense of what to do, but he felt that this had become an incomprehensible blow to him. Maddie sat in front of him, trembling, her gaze unable to meet his. And then James came along. He was always there, and we started talking more. Of course, you're not talking to your husband anymore, Alex said, his voice sharp again. That's convenient, isn't it? Leave everything to James to avoid responsibility. Maddie looked at him with deep sadness in her eyes, but she couldn't argue. She knew he was right. I didn't want to hurt you, Alex, she said in a tone that could have been taken as sincere if not for the uncertain expression on her face. But I couldn't deny that something more developed between James and me. Something more? Alex asked, feeling his chest tighten. And you decided it was better to hide it from me rather than tell me directly? Maddie stared at the table, and Alex saw her hand begin to tremble. Letting out a quiet sigh, she raised her eyes to meet his. I didn't know how to say it. All these years, I've been with you, and I didn't want to lose that. But now I can't even say who I really am. I'm lost, Alex. Yeah, I can see that, he replied with regret, though his voice carried a certain coldness. You're lost, and I'm losing you. You're choosing between me and James, but I can't be part of this game anymore. The room fell silent, with only the ticking clock breaking through the stillness. Alex knew what his next step had to be, but he couldn't find the strength within himself. Maddie, I don't know if I can stay in this. I need time to think. I can't stay in a marriage if you can't be honest with me. He stood up, and for a moment, all his feelings became neutral, as if he was stepping out of some comfort zone. Maddie quickly stood and approached him. Her eyes held a desperate attempt to bring everything back. Don't go, please. We can fix this. Just give me time. I don't want to lose you. I don't know, Maddie. I've already lost trust in you. Alex pulled away from her embrace as if he couldn't hear her pleas. His heart was racing, and he felt trapped in this emotional deadlock. Maddie began to speak, but her voice broke. I don't want you to leave. I love you, Alex, but I also know I made a mistake. No, you didn't just make one mistake. You made several. And you've been running away from admitting it to yourself for a long time, he said, not turning to face her. His words sounded like a verdict. What do you mean? Maddie asked, her voice quiet and exhausted. You think everything can be fixed after you chose him over me? When James appeared, I saw it happening. You didn't even try to hide it because you were already ready for the change. You just didn't want to admit that everything had shifted. Maddie slowed down and sat on the couch. I don't know why it happened, Alex. I always thought we could get through this together, but it got harder with every year. And now, I don't even know what I feel anymore. Alex remained silent, his face once again cold. From how everything unfolded, he didn't know what to do next. Maddie seemed so confused, but at the same time, he felt like she had chosen her path. Now, it was hard for her to let go of what they used to have. She stayed because she feared the consequences of her decisions. I can't be part of this story anymore, Alex said with a heavy heart. He slowly walked toward the door. Goodbye, Maddie. Leaving her there, Alex felt pieces of his heart tearing away. But it was the only way. He had to leave to find himself again. Alex sat in his favorite chair, staring out the window. He couldn't believe he had ended up in this situation. Maddie, his wife, had been part of his life for so many years. They had faced challenges together, but what had happened exceeded everything he had ever imagined about their relationship. He tried to understand why she acted the way she did, why she betrayed him with Jason and James. It was unthinkable. But today, something had changed. Maddie was back. She had returned home after days of silence and unanswered questions, and it was no coincidence. I want you to hear me out, Maddie said, standing in the doorway. Her voice was soft, but there was a pain in it that Alex couldn't ignore. Alex didn't lift his eyes from the window. He didn't know if he wanted to hear her apologies or just leave things as they were. What do you want, Maddie? His voice was cold, and it was all he could muster to say. Maddie took a step forward, her hands trembling nervously, though she tried to hide it. I understand that I've made a terrible mistake. I betrayed you, and I can't change that. But I want you to know that it won't happen again. Her words were heavy, like stones. I love you, Alex, and I'm willing to do anything to earn your trust again. Alex couldn't tell if these were just words, or if there was genuine change behind them. He had lost his trust in her long ago, but there was still a part of him that held on to the memories of when they were happy together. Maddie, He turned to her, his eyes cold, though deep inside he felt a painful tightening. You want me to believe that you won't betray me again? How can I do that after everything that's happened? Maddie lowered her head, as if struck by the weight of her own words. She knew he was right, and it hurt. I know it will be hard, but I don't want to lose you. I can't explain why I did what I did. It was weakness. It was something I couldn't control. Her voice was barely audible, and she stepped closer to him, trying to hold herself together. Alex looked at her with pain in his eyes. He couldn't undo what had happened, but she was still his wife. And he couldn't just walk away without trying to understand why it all happened. Weakness? You didn't just make a mistake, Maddie. You betrayed me with 2 people. That's not just weakness. It's more than I can comprehend. His words hit like punches to the chest. But I'm still willing to give you a chance. Only if you answer one question. Maddie lifted her gaze, hoping her words would be convincing this time. What's the question? She asked cautiously. Why? Alex looked into her eyes, and his gaze held both pain and uncertainty. Why did you do it? Why did you betray me? I want to understand what was going through your mind when you did it. Maddie turned away, as if the words burned her. She couldn't give him the answer he was waiting for. She couldn't explain it without coming across as even more selfish and shameless. I don't know. I was confused. I couldn't find myself, and I don't know why it happened. Her voice was full of sadness and despair. I just wanted to feel alive again. I thought it would help me figure things out, but instead, I ruined everything. Alex sat in silence, his gaze heavy, like chains holding him back. He didn't know if he could forgive her, but every time she spoke, he felt a part of him wanting to believe her. Maddie, I can't understand it, but I'm willing to listen. Maybe I'll be able to figure out why you did it. But that doesn't mean I'm ready to forgive it just like that, he said as he stood up and began pacing the room, as if searching for answers in the empty space. Maddie watched him intently, unsure if she should keep talking. Her feelings were a mix of guilt and hope that Alex truly wanted to give her a chance. But she understood that it all might be in vain. I won't promise that everything will be okay, but I promise I won't do it again. I know I've lost your trust, and I'm willing to work on myself, on our relationship. If you're willing, I'm ready to walk this path with you. Her words were sincere, though doubt lingered in her eyes. Alex stopped, looking at her with pain in his heart. He understood that this conversation wouldn't solve their problems, but perhaps it was the first step towards something new. Could he forgive her? Could he trust her again? The questions remained unanswered, but one thing was clear. Their relationship would never be the same again. I don't know if I can forgive this, Maddie, he said quietly, but with determination in his voice. But we have to walk this path together if we want to have a chance at a future. Maddie took a step toward him, her eyes filling with tears, though she didn't let them fall. She only nodded, understanding that all she could do now was take action. Alex couldn't sleep that night. His thoughts revolved around Maddie, her words, her assurances that it wouldn't happen again. They sat together, exchanging only a few phrases that tied them invisibly, like chains he couldn't break free from. But something in her voice, in her eyes, made him doubt. Something was missing, something he couldn't find, even when he asked her directly. In the days following their conversation, Maddie began spending more time with him. She tried to be more present at home, cooking dinner, asking about his day. Her behavior had changed, but this new version of her made him suspicious. He couldn't understand why she seemed to give in so easily. And could she really change overnight? That evening, they sat on the couch watching an old movie they used to love. Maddie leaned against him like she used to, but something about her demeanor wasn't the same. Alex could feel it. Her gaze often drifted into the deep shadows of the room, and her hands, which had always been in his, now rested on her lap. "What's wrong, Maddie?" he asked, unable to hold it in. She looked at him again, but this time her eyes held more than despair or pain. There was something else, something he couldn't recognize. I've been thinking about us," she tried to smile, but it only made him more uneasy. She wasn't as open as she used to be. "About us?" He raised an eyebrow. "We've already talked about this. You said you wanted to rebuild trust, that you wouldn't betray me again. But your words don't exactly match your actions." Maddie fell silent, her gaze distant, as if she hadn't heard him. But Alex could already sense that something was wrong. She was hiding something. I want you to know, her voice softened, but that only made him more uneasy. I've learned something about James. Alex felt his heart skip a beat. James, her friend, the one she had betrayed him with before. Something was off, and he could feel it. What about him? He couldn't hide the tension in his voice. I thought he had left me alone, but he's back in my life, and this time, I don't know what to do. Alex grabbed her shoulders, turning her to face him, forcing her to look into his eyes. Don't play games with me, Maddie. You promised this was all behind us. She lowered her head, her voice quiet, as if she were afraid to say what came next. I know, but you don't understand. I got a letter from him. He wants me back. He said I have to choose. Either I stay with you, or I go back to him. Alex pushed her away, feeling as if the ground beneath him was shifting. He couldn't believe it. This was too much. James, that betrayer, still had such a hold over Maddie? He didn't even know what to say. Are you serious? His voice sounded as if he'd been struck. And you're telling me this now? After everything? Maddie lifted her head, her eyes filled with tears. I don't know what to do, Alex. I'm confused. I thought I could figure things out, but it's only gotten harder. I don't want to lose you, but I don't know what I feel for James. Alex stared at her, his heart filling with pain. But there was another emotion as well, anger. He had lost faith in her, and he felt something dark stirring inside him. And you call this a choice? You don't even know if you love me or James. His voice turned cold as ice. Maddie hung her head, unable to find the words. She couldn't answer him because she wasn't sure of her feelings. She did love him, but James was still a part of her life, even though she knew it shouldn't be that way. I can't keep living with this guilt, she said quietly. Maybe I need to be honest with you. I need to feel like I'm not losing myself. I'm afraid to stay with you if my feelings aren't entirely clear. Alex stood as still as stone, feeling his heart tighten. He didn't know what to do. Maddie was once the woman he thought was his soulmate. But now, it was something else. He didn't know if he could trust her again. And this new choice James had presented her felt like the final straw. Do you want to leave me? His words were a plea, but he already knew the answer. Maddie remained silent, her heart racing, as if teetering on the edge of losing everything. And what if I say we can still be together, but you have to choose? His voice softened again, but there was a chill in it. He was trying to understand what mattered more to her, him or James. Alex watched Maddie, her tears falling onto the pillow she held on her lap. There was something in her eyes that made him doubt. She was trying to be honest with him, but her words carried more than uncertainty. It was fear, a fear of losing what she loved, even if it meant losing a part of herself. Do you really think we can be together after everything? Her voice trembled, as if she didn't know how to frame the question. Alex stared at her. I don't know. Maybe, if you really want it, it's possible. But it can't be like this. You can't just choose between us like two options in a store. You need to understand that this is about trust. And I can't be the fool again, believing you'll change just because you say you will. Maddie lowered her head, feeling her heart break at his words. She loved him, but she also felt the heavy weight of James. Her mind said one thing, but her heart said another. She was standing at a crossroads that could change everything in her life. I don't want to lose you, Alex, she said, lifting her gaze to meet his. Her voice was deep and full of pain, and he could see she wasn't lying. But there was still a part of him that doubted. She still had some connection to James, and it made him feel like all these years were just a temporary refuge from deeper problems. I don't know if I can trust you again, Maddie, he said quietly, but his words were like a cold knife cutting through everything. She trembled. I understand, and I'm ready to accept whatever decision you make. I won't try to force you to come back to me anymore. I need to figure out what I want on my own. Do you really want to come back to me? He finally asked, with all the pain that overwhelmed him. Maddie nodded, her hands clinging tightly to the pillow as if trying to hold her entire soul together, to keep it from breaking apart. I don't know what this will look like, but I'm ready to work on myself. And I'm ready to open up to you again, if you'll let me. Alex sighed deeply, looking into her eyes. He could see the sincere struggle in them. He knew love wasn't just about perfect moments. Love was about scars and pain too. And he couldn't simply forget everything that had happened. But something in his heart told him there might still be a chance. Do you really want to rebuild trust? He repeated the question, feeling each word weigh heavily, like a burden. Maddie paused for a moment. There was honesty in her gaze as she finally replied, "Yes, I'm ready. But only if you can see that I've changed, that I'm real. I don't want to be the person I was before." He looked at her, his heart beating faster. She seemed so vulnerable, so genuine. But what if it was just another deception? What if she hadn't truly changed and was simply trying to manipulate him again? "You haven't convinced me, Maddie." His voice turned cold. "I need more than just words. I want to see change. I want to see real actions, not empty promises." Maddie lowered her head. She understood that he needed more, and she was ready to prove it to him. "I'm ready, Alex," she said quietly. "I want to do this. I know it's going to be hard, but I'm willing to fight for us. And if you'll let me, I'll prove to you that I can be the person you want to see." Alex stayed silent for a few minutes, trying to figure out if she was truly ready to change, or if this was just another attempt to hold on to him. He couldn't decide whether to give her a chance, or simply let everything go and move forward. "And if I give you a chance," his voice was soft but carried a certain determination. "If I decide I'm ready to trust you again, you'll have to let go of all your past mistakes. I won't be your backup plan. I'll be all or nothing." Maddie took a deep breath and looked at him again. Her eyes were now clearer than ever. "I'm ready, Alex. I'm ready to be yours and yours alone." They sat there, silently looking at each other, and in the stillness of the night, a new beginning seemed to emerge. But even in that silence, Alex couldn't shake the feeling that their story was far from over. Alex sat on the couch, staring into the void, his thoughts spinning faster than he could keep up with. What should he do next? He felt like he was standing at a crossroads, and every step he took could change everything. Maddie sat next to him, her gaze filled with sorrow, but there was also hope in her eyes. She was ready to change, but was he? All the months of pain and betrayal had left deep scars, and while his heart pulled him toward her, his mind couldn't forget everything that had happened. "Are you truly sure you're ready?" he asked quietly, not lifting his gaze. "Ready to leave all this behind and start again?" Maddie nodded, her voice a bit shaky but full of determination. "I don't want to lose you, Alex. And I know we can't just go back to how things were before. I can't forget everything that's happened, but I want to be with you. I want us to have another chance." Alex didn't respond immediately. His heart was beating faster, but he still couldn't let go of all the doubts. She needed time to prove her words with actions, but would he have the patience? And could he truly forget everything she had done? He looked at the tears forming in her eyes again and felt a pang of pain. She was his world, and he couldn't just give up on her. But it wasn't that simple. "I don't know if I can trust you again," he said once more, his voice calm, but it didn't mean he wasn't feeling everything he had been through. "Maddie, you betrayed me, and it's hard to let that go." She stepped closer to him, her hands trembling, but she steadfastly held his gaze. "I know I made mistakes, and I understand that it can't be forgotten, but I love you, and I'm ready to fix it, if you'll let me." "Love?" he burst out again. "You say you love me, and then you go to bed with other men? How do you expect me to believe you after that?" Maddie flinched, her face turning pale again. But she knew she couldn't hide from the truth anymore. She was ready to do whatever it took to rebuild what they once had. She sat down beside him and placed her hand on his. "I was weak, and I'm afraid it might have destroyed everything. But I want to fix it. Not now, not tomorrow, but I'm ready to work on it, day by day." Alex looked at her, realizing that while her words were full of pain, they weren't empty. She wasn't just apologizing. She wanted to change her life, and if he allowed her to do so, there might be a chance for a new beginning. But what kind of beginning would that be? And how many times could he allow her to make mistakes? "My father always said, if you want to build a relationship, it has to be built together. But can we do that after everything?" he said, searching her eyes for even the smallest glimmer of hope to hold on to. "I'm ready," she said again. This time her voice was clearer, more confident. "I'm not asking you to forget. I'm asking you to give me a chance to show you that I can be different. Alex took a deep breath. His heart was still in pieces, but he felt that she might be right. He couldn't keep living in the past, constantly looking back. Maybe he needed to move forward, to trust her with a part of himself again. But before he could do that, he had to understand why it all happened. Why? His voice carried the weight of someone desperate to understand, to find a justification for her actions. Why did you do it? Why did you betray me? Maddie lowered her head, her shoulders trembling. She looked so vulnerable that Alex almost pitied her. You don't know how hard it was to be with you when everything started falling apart. I couldn't find a way to express my feelings, and then it all spiraled out of control. I didn't want to lose you, but I didn't know how to stay. Betraying me to find yourself? He asked, sarcasm dripping from his words. No, I just wanted to find a way to deal with the pain. But it was a mistake, Alex. I was weak. Silence filled the room. Alex sat there, feeling as though everything was tearing him apart from the inside. Did he have enough strength to forgive everything? To try again? Or would this be the definitive end of their relationship? I'll give you a chance, Maddie, he finally said. His words were cautious but certain. But you have to be honest with me. I can't take another lie. Maddie sobbed, her eyes filling with tears, but this time, they were tears of gratitude. She knew it wouldn't be easy, and that she would have to fight for it, but she was ready to do so. If he gave her a chance, she would never betray him again. I'll be honest. I promise, she said, holding his hand as if it were her last hope. Alex looked at her, his heart still racing. He didn't know where this would lead them, but he was willing to try again. Alex didn't sleep all night. He sat on the bed while Maddie slept beside him. She hugged her pillow tightly, trying to sleep peacefully, but he couldn't forget everything that had happened. His heart ached, but not for her. It ached for himself. He couldn't live in a world where betrayal lingered. He needed to move forward, to breathe fresh air, not sit in this constant pain. In the morning, he quietly got up, careful not to wake her. He knew this was going to be hard, but his decision was made. He packed his things, placed the bag on the floor, and looked at Maddie. Her face was so peaceful, but she didn't know that by tomorrow, everything would change. She woke up to the sound of movement in the hallway. She looked at the empty bed and immediately ran to him. Alex? Her voice was filled with worry. Where are you going? He turned to her, his expression firm. I can't live like this anymore, Maddie. This isn't about your mistakes. It's about my choices. I can't keep living in this lie. Maddie stood frozen, her eyes wide. What are you saying? I'm leaving. I can't be with you anymore, he said, his voice calm but pained. I love someone else. Maddie couldn't say anything. Her heart shattered. Who is it? Alex looked at her one last time, feeling the weight of his words. Laura. She's always been there when you left me. I can't ignore what I feel for her anymore. With those words, he walked out, leaving her standing there, amidst the pieces of everything that had broken. What would you have done in Alex's place, knowing your wife had cheated on you with 2 men? How would you react to her attempts to come back to you?